Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we will be learning how to factor trinomials. It's a little bit more tricky than factoring binomials, but it's very easy to learn. So first of all, a trinomial is just a fancy term for a polynomial with three terms, such as x squared plus 5x plus 6. You can see that there are three terms, that's why it's called a trinomial. The goal of factoring a trinomial is to break it down into two binomials, like this. Let's do a walkthrough of factoring a trinomial like this. The main idea is that we want two numbers that multiply with the third term. In this case, it's 6. And add up to the second term. In this case, it's 5. Also, this only works if there's no number in front of the x squared over here. So, in this trinomial, 2 and 3 would work because 2 times 3 equals 6, which does fulfill this one, and 2 plus 3 equals 5, which does fulfill this one. So we can write this down as x plus 2 times x plus 3, and this is just a factored version of this. Also note, the order of the binomials doesn't really matter because you're multiplying. So if we have a binomial like we did in the previous answer, like x plus 2 times x plus 3, it could also be flipped the other way, and we could have x plus 3 times x plus 2. The next question is a little harder. What if the first term isn't just x squared? What if there is something like this, where there is a number in front of the x squared? Well, there's many different variants, but I'll go over the easiest one first. If it's possible, factor out the first number evenly. If not, then there's a completely different method to factor out an uneven trinomial, which I will go over in a minute. In this case, we factor out a 2. And so after we factor it out, we end up with this. Okay, so we have x squared, and 2 can divide evenly into 14x, which gives us 7x, and it can also evenly divide into 24, which gives us 12. Then we do the same steps as we did previously. So something that multiplies to the last term, which is 12, and adds up to 7. So our numbers here are 4 and 3, because 4 times 3 equals 12, and it also adds up to 7. So here's what we do. We bring down the 2, we don't forget about the 2, and then our final answer would just be x4 and x plus 3. Again, the order you put the binomials are in don't really matter, so it can be x plus 3 times x plus 4, but this would also be an acceptable answer. Well, what if a trinomial is uneven and we can't factor out the first number evenly? Then we can use the grouping method. So we gotta make sure we can't factor out the first number, and we're sure because 3 cannot go evenly into 10 and 8. So the first step of the grouping method is to multiply the first and third terms. So in this case it would be 3 times 8, and that's 24. And then the second step is to also bring out the middle term. So in this case, it would be -10. The second step is to find two numbers that multiply to the first and third term and add to the second term. So it's pretty similar to factoring normal trinomials. In this case, the numbers are -6 and -4 because they multiply to positive 24 and they add to -10. The next step is to use these numbers to break apart the trinomial into those terms. So we have 3x squared, and then we break this -10 into -6x and -4x, and we have the 8 here. And so what this does is it allows us to factor out these pairs, and then when we factor these out, we can factor out 3x, which leaves us with x and -2, and here we can factor out on -4, leaving us with 3x and minus 2. After we do that, we leave the first binomial as it is, and then we take the remaining coefficients, which are 3x and minus 4, and we put them in their own bracket next to this. And there we have it. We just factored out a really tricky trinomial. But it's very tricky, but once you get the hang of it, it's quite easy with practice. That's it. Factoring trinomials is quite a big jump just because of the longer processes, but if you understand, give yourself a pat on the back. If you didn't, feel free to drop down any questions in the comments, and make sure to like and subscribe. That's all. Bye.